Don't turn the light on too soon when I've gone. You can't pretend that you're not alone, and I have not gone. And I don't mean to go burst your bubble, but that's the trouble with truth sometimes. And I guess Superman never really ever gave a damn about Lois Lane, the Daily Planet, all the people there. He's just showing off, 'cause his parents didn't love him much, and you believed in me. You think I'm sick.
Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. Good to see you all here in the live chat. I'm really excited about this show because I'm going to learn something from someone who I think does something better than I do. So it's always nice to absorb a bit of knowledge from someone. I am, of course, talking about Ed Thorne, who's going to be my guest on today's show. He was responsible for mixing this whole song, but you heard a part of it there, my song Superman, which I released just a few weeks ago or so. And we're going to be sort of picking his brain a little bit. I have hardly talked to him at all about what his approach was for this mix, but I can tell you I was extremely pleased with the mix when I heard it and the various revisions as we went along. We're going to be talking about all that and just trying to get a little bit of insight into his approaches for a few specific parts of the mix, actually, which we'll go through. Things like I was really interested in the drums, the vocals, and also the guitars, both acoustic and electric, and how he treated those. As I say, lovely to see you all in the live chat. Quick hi to a couple of our mods who are in here. Doug, nice to see you here. Kionra, always lovely to see you. Glad you could make it this time. We also have the Mix Club. Nice to see you again, man. We have Untapped Rhythm Productions. We've got Ashley. Really good to see you. I think Nick was here earlier. Nick Ellis, I saw him here earlier. So lovely to see you here. I'm going to be asking Ed some questions, but you know, do type your questions as well in the live chat. And if you're watching the replay, please feel free to ask questions in the comments down below. Quick mention for our sponsor, DistroKid. As ever, they are sponsoring this show. Thank you so much. We'll be hearing a little about them later. Now, before I bring Ed in, I thought I'd give you a quick little bit of history about the song because I think it's kind of interesting, and I'll let you decide exactly why. Ed doesn't know this, in fact, but I actually wrote the song something like, Jade knows this story. Hello, Jade, who's just arrived. Something like 25, 26 years ago, I wrote this song after I broke up with someone. And I remember playing it for the first time to a friend, a fellow busker on the streets. I was busking at the time, and I played it to her, and she said, "What a fantastic song. I love that song. Awesome. You should record that." And I thought, I will. And it took me about a year after that before I actually had a studio in my house. I'd just arrived in Australia, and it was one of the first songs I recorded way back then, and did my initial mixes of it, and actually played it to some family members. And when they played it, they made that look on their face, you know, like, that's dog shit thing. They didn't like it at all. And I don't remember having a hissy fit, but it upset me, and I deleted the whole project. I deleted the whole song completely. Got rid of it, and I would occasionally strum it to myself once in a while over those years. And then about I'd say about a year and a half ago, I was sitting in the bedroom. I happened to play it, Susie was in the other room, and she said, "What's that song you're playing there?" And I said, "Oh, it's just something I wrote years ago." She said, "It's like one of the best songs I've ever heard from you. You should record that." And I was like, "Oh, should I?" So I did this time, and it took me 2 or 3 months to record it, actually, doing bits and pieces here and there. Anyway, I did, I went through a few revisions of mixes myself, and I was actually pretty pleased with the mix that I had produced, to be honest with you. Getting ready to sort of think about a video and all that stuff. And then around about that time when I was doing that, I saw a post from Ed, which was about his mixing services. And then I think on his webpage or somewhere, there was some A/Bs, some before afters. So people had sent him their songs, and he played like their version before the mix and after the mix. And I was really impressed. And I knew of Ed's work because I'd heard his own music, I'd heard his own mixes, but I was really, really impressed with what he'd done for 5 or 6 songs that I listened to there. And I was particularly impressed because they were quite sort of dense mixes, and which is not something I do so much of myself these days. And they were just very, very solid sounding. And I thought maybe I should ask Ed if he wants to have a go at this song, even though I was happy with it. And I was very pleased that I did. He said yes. And even the first revision I got back from him, I thought, yeah, I'm onto something here. He's picked up on a couple of things that I really didn't, that I could have improved on. And I was super, super happy. And the rest of the story we can tell when I bring the man on himself. Sorry for waffling, but here is Ed Thorne. There he is, mate.
Hey, everyone.
This is Ed, folks. Say hello to him. Ed, it's been a while since we've been on a show together. Super happy to have you on here. We don't get a chance to catch up very often, but it's really nice. We've had a little chat beforehand. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks. And it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you very much for the kind words. And I can totally relate about the story of playing songs to your family. Whenever I play songs to my parents, and bear in mind, I don't know about for you, but for me to write, demo, record, edit, generally produce, arrange recording sessions, a song for me can take 100 hours of work easily.
Right. Absolutely.
And you've done all that. You've put your soul into the song. The lyrics have been therapy for you. You're putting everything out there, all your warts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Areas where you're not confident, like for me, it's singing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you play songs to your parents on their their rubbish sounding Alexa in their lounge or whatever. And the first thing my dad will say, "Yes, it's a decent song. Do you know who's a good songwriter, Ed? Joe Cocker. Daphne, play a Joe Cocker song." And I'm like, really? Is that all this song gets out of you? Right, okay. I won't be playing any songs to you ever again until you hear them on the radio.
So it can be a little bit like, from a YouTuber's perspective or anyone involved in social media, where you read 100 positive comments and you get that one. You get that one negative comment, it's on your mind for the rest of the day, it bothers you and disheartens you, right? It can be a little bit like that with music, just takes... So, look, we're all going to get negative responses sometimes. I just wish back then, 25 years ago, I'd had a little bit more faith in myself and gone, they don't know what they're talking about. I like this song.
Story of my life. Believe in yourself. I'm getting there. At 38, I'm finally getting there, I think.
Well, I think you should believe in yourself because I genuinely have been really pleased with the mix. Lots of people have mentioned how good the mix was, and some people have assumed that I've mixed it and have said, "Great production, Mike, you did a great job." And I've gone, "Sure," and not mentioned you, of course. So, no, I try and give you credit where it's due.
Well, it was a good production, and that was down to you, and that's what made the mix come together ultimately, because the mix is only as good as the production and the song. So kudos to you. When you sent me your rough mix to work off, I listened to it and I thought, I don't know what I can do to this. I don't know how I can make it any better. It was already in a very, very good place. And then I honed in on a couple of details I think we'll chat about later. So I'm really glad you're happy. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I think what look, it says a lot about us sort of home recording people like me, is that we can work in isolation a lot and get comfortable with that. You don't get challenged too much, and you know, you can just, it's that heaven of doing. I mean, I spent years in a band. It was a nightmare arguing all the time about it. So you know,
Tell
it's
me about
nice to go, right, I want to do what, but yeah, I think that what some of what you did was not so much better, although it was better subjectively, but it was more like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. Oh, that was good. Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. You know, and you just tried some different things with the mix, even with some very basic things like panning and stuff like that. I was going, all right, I wouldn't have panned that over there, but now I hear it. That sounds pretty good. I like that. You know,
I think there were a couple of things in the rough mix which I would usually suggest to anyone mixing for other people. Get a rough mix if the client has one, and pay attention to where they're panning stuff, because that's obviously what they've got in their mind. There were a couple of things I thought, I'm not sure that's going to work. And then I did I tell you, or did I just throw it to you and see if you noticed? I can't remember.
I think honestly, well, this is good. We should talk about the revision process. And I should say to the audience, of course, me and Ed are geographically about as far apart as you can get. I'm in Australia and Ed's in London. So we had to do this, you know, via exchanging messages and what have you. I don't. What system was it you used, Ed, for revisions? I can't remember what web page you were using there.
So for all my clients, I use a website called mixup.audio. Mixup.audio, which I believe is from the Pure Mix team, the guys behind the Pure Mix Academy. I don't quote me on that, but basically it enables you to post revisions, and it'll tell you what LUFS level each version is at. So you can post the rough mix. I can't remember if I did that, but it was definitely mix 1. And then the person can go on the website. It's free to use. There's a free version for the provider, as it were, me, and it's free for anyone accessing the link. And then there's a paid version where you can put, passwords behind links and stuff and really make stuff private. But it's great. People can leave comments on timestamps, kind of like SoundCloud, but just more professional.
Yeah, and private as well. So it was that was probably the most useful thing about it, because I could pinpoint exact points where I could say, hey, that bit there, could we make that louder, or whatever it was. I think we had a little to and fro over one specific thing, and it might have been, I think I remember, I had like a little bit of feedback happening on the tail end of a lead guitar somewhere, and I was going, just a little bit louder with that, or a little bit quieter, back to where it was. And,
in the breakdown, yeah.
And I think that's where you go, if we were both in the same room, you could just push the fader to the point where we both nod our heads and go, yeah, that's right. So, working remotely can have its difficulties, but then again, for precision purposes, I found it quite good. I think we did about 6 or 7 revisions, if I remember rightly, all in all.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, which I think is really good. I don't know how you go with other clients in terms of numbers of revisions, but I thought that was pretty good.
Just not as demanding as you, Mike. I mean, the mix revision process is an interesting one, because obviously, I do 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 mixes before I send it out to someone. And that will be, maybe on a Monday I'll do 1 and come in on Tuesday and check it, and then, translation, check it on different systems and do a few different checks and that before I send it out. So for me, it's usually in a place where I'm pretty sure it's right, but I know, again, the following day I'm going to hear different things, and the client's going to hear different things. And there's an argument of not taking a mix too far. And there's a mentor of mine who does this. He gets it maybe 80% of the way there and then sends it to the client, knowing he's going to get feedback. So in this case, I think I'd got it most of the way there. And then I thought, okay, well, Mike's going to hear things differently. But with the revision process, before we'd even got there, I had thought a little bit analytically in terms of, right, how do I want to present the track? I've got the rough track. I mean, your mix, not a rough mix. It was a good mix. Obviously, the priorities for Mike, being a guitarist and a vocalist, are the guitars and the vocals. So let's make sure they're prominent. And I think even then they weren't quite as prominent as you wanted, were they, in places?
I think that I've got to reveal a little bit. My problem is I've got to be very careful with the high end of vocals, because I like it to sound very sparkly and crisp. And I can't tell you the number of mixes I've done where I've thought that sounds great, and then like a week later I think, no, it doesn't sound great. It sounds a bit harsh and piercing. So I can tend to go a little overboard myself. I don't know if you like that. You become aware of your own weaknesses sometimes with maybe your preferences where you go a bit too far. But yeah, so I think initially I was like, hey, mate, can we just have a little bit more top end, give a bit more presence to that vocal? Because I do like that. But of course, it's a very difficult thing to control because it can quickly become harsh, and sibilance gets really difficult to control as well, you know, and that sort of thing as well. So I think we'll go into that with the vocals a bit. But I think that was one of the first things I said, yeah. It was one of the more difficult things to go to and fro on, yeah, because I have a very specific idea about how my acoustic guitar should sound and my vocal. And because not all I've ever done, but 80% of the time I'm doing my vocal, not other people's, mine and Susie's, you know. So I've got a very reliable vocal chain and stuff, which obviously I vary from song to song a little bit, but I've got basically a template for it.
Yeah.
So,
and
anyway.
it is really hard for somebody else to try and get into your mind and into your ears and understand what you hear and what you want to hear. I've had a similar experience where I've had a guy who befriended me, and he wanted to have a go at mixing. So I sent him a couple of my songs, and he's a great mix engineer, but it became very apparent to me just how OCD about my own music and sound that I am. And he did some good mixes, and then he did them off his own back without listening to the original. And then as a test to see where his ears were at. And then he went and listened to the original, heard what was different. And then I kind of coached him on what I needed or wanted. And it was a very interesting experience discussing that with him from an artist point of view and from a mix engineer point of view. And I realized there is nobody in the world who is going to understand my music like I do.
Yeah, right.
So it was a really good experience for working with people like yourself who, you know a lot about the mixing process, you know, very, very qualified and talented in your own right, and trying to get into that headspace and, you know, communicate with similar language, like what does warm mean to you, or what does sheen mean, or what does sparkle mean?
Yeah.
And those things just require a conversation.
And I have a specific taste personally, which maybe not unusual, but I love very dry vocals. But the thing is about so-called dry vocals, when we hear a dry vocal on a good track, it sounds like, oh yeah, they just put the mic there and recorded it. Of course, there's a whole bunch of things that can go into a good sounding dry vocal. But yeah, I like something that sounds like, sometimes I like things that sounds like someone's whispering in your ear kind of thing, or singing right in your ear. That's my personal taste. Some people like a massively produced vocal which sounds like it's in a cathedral or what have you, you know. Depends on the genre of music and all that. So yeah, that it's just the thing I like. Probably I could have, looking back on it now, I suppose I'm thinking out loud, one thing we didn't make use of, or I didn't communicate with you, was any reference tracks. And probably if I'd said to you, try this song, listen to the guy's vocals on that, that's the kind of thing I'm going for. So lesson learned there, I suppose. We you know, that would have been helpful probably.
Well, my bad for not asking you for them, because that is something I do usually ask for that exact reason. You know, you need, you know, audio is vast. To try and target a sound in the vastness, it's obviously going to go the direction of my ears and sensibilities and preferences, but that might not be aligned with yours, whereas there's some reference tracks can make me think, okay, well, you know, that's the amount of low end I need in the track, that's the amount of guitar balance I need. Yeah. So
but having said that, you see, and that's where your kind of happy mistakes happen, because I remember, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I remember you used a delay on the vocal, which is quite apparent in the track, which I hadn't used at all and wouldn't have thought to use, you see. And if I'd been sort of saying to you, I just want this super dry vocal, sounds like it's untreated, you may not have tried that. And that was one of those things, when I first listened to the track, I went, oh, he's put a big old delay on there. And then, you know, when your mind goes, because it's so used to hearing the last 200 mixes you've heard, and it's now something new, and your brain goes, do I like that? And then within about 10 seconds, I was like, you know what, I do like that. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I like that, you know. And that's where you worry that if I just communicated so specifically with you about what I wanted, that you wouldn't be able to put yourself into it at all, you know, in terms of the mix. So let's talk about vocals in a bit more detail. I'm glad we've talked about the revision process. Doug was asking, let me just answer him quickly. So communication was mostly through messaging. Yes, it was, Doug. I don't think we had any real-time communication. Ed's a bit of a lazy typer. He usually sends voice messages. It's always lovely to hear his voice, though. I mean, but yeah, we didn't have any. I don't think we had any real-time chats. Just got it done through messaging. Both super busy as well, so it was a bit like yep, do that, yep kind of thing. It was. We didn't ponder too much, but it was good. We got the result. I did forget to mention at the top of the show, by the way, folks, that I've got a link in the description down below to Ed's services, as well as a link to the full song, which you can watch on YouTube. So if you want to sort of check with that as we go through, if you want to check things later, then do. But I will move on to quickly, Ed, very quickly, because I think this is a bit dry, but process. Just so folks know, I exported stems, almost completely dry. I think there might be a couple of things where I left some effects on there, but pretty much dry. Made them available to Ed, making sure. I mean, I personally, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not, for what Ed normally wants, but I would normally just I've always gain stage things anyway by that time. So I want to use the term gain staging so carefully here, because people get tied up in knots about it. Let's just say I had things at a decent level, you know, a usable level. Hopefully, I think, Ed. Mono things were mono. If there were stereo things, they were stereo, and that's the way I think. We know that probably not everyone does know, the word stems does get misused. Probably we should be saying multi-tracks or something, but essentially, folks, if you're doing this, you don't want to send things that are too treated through to a mix engineer in terms of effects and things, unless it's a stylistic effect, probably. You know, obviously, if your electric guitar has certain effects on it and things like that, send them through. But I don't know if I sent you effects buses, stems of effects buses. I probably didn't, Ed, because I probably wanted to leave it with you. But, folks... No. You could send that through to people. You could send stems from effects buses. Probably that would be helpful in terms of giving a mix engineer a sense of direction on certain things, I suppose. But what do you think about that, Ed? What would be your recommendation?
Well, one of my mentors would totally disagree with you. Because sure. he wants the wet stems because that's what the producer and the artist have in mind. However, then wet stems can cause problems because you can't take away effects. Yeah. You can add them, but you can't take them away. I mean, you can do some spectral processing and you know,
why would you want to
soothe on everything? You know, to get resonance and that, but it's creating more work. So it's a bit of a fine line. I mean, if, for example, there's an effect that I have no idea what's going on, I would maybe say, can you send me the effect stem of that, so the dry, and then just print the effect, or combine the two. But I mean, I try and keep it as simple as possible. So if you send wet stems and you want to put them in, I'll put them in. I mean, I did go through a phase of asking for both dry and wet, but that proved difficult with some clients who didn't know how to send both, which is fine. So it was just dry. Reverb's a reverb to most people. We can talk about the nuances of that later. So I don't really have an opinion. I'll just take whatever's given, and if there's a problem, I'll highlight it.
Okay, cool. All right, so the first point of focus for me, and this may seem like an odd place to start, given that the vocals and the guitars are so prominent in the song, but the very first thing I noticed about the song for me was a massive improvement on over my mix, for the drums. Probably shouldn't be a surprise, because you being a drummer by trade, probably know a thing or two about mixing drums that I don't. Yes. So now I should say to people, there weren't real drums. It was a bit sacrilegical. I sent Ed some something which was actually created in Addictive. I should have asked him to play drums, but he was already doing enough for me already. So they were from Addictive Drums. I wouldn't send a stereo stems from that, so they were separated. And if you can, folks, personally, I would like to receive, if I was doing it, both each dry drum, and usually those plugins are going to have some overheads and rooms and things like that as well. So, and that's where all the life of the kit really comes from. So it's kind of handy to have that. But Ed, the first thing I noticed, and I think I might have a clue how you achieve this, but the first thing I noticed was how much more punchy the drums were than my mix. All right. I'm not going to, lips are sealed. I think I probably know what your secret weapons may be, but give me an idea about how you approach that.
So my first reaction for the drums was, okay, this has been played by a, dare I say, non-drummer on an electronic kit. And this was before I was aware. So with, what was it? Slate. What did he use again?
I use Addictive Drums.
Addictive Drums. Is that the software that will create drum parts for you? Or is that
no,
did you program stuff?
I
and then
programmed
use,
it. Yeah, I programmed it. Yeah.
So
drum by drum. Yes, Karen. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been laborious.
Well, I played it in on my keyboard. I didn't do it step by step. I played it with my fingers on my keyboard.
Okay. So my first thought was there are certain, and this is, I guess, a production thing. And I did consider recording some drums, but I think I was short on time. They're just little details that a drummer would do differently.
Sure.
Now, I think what you did was good, but there are just a couple of little things like, I think at one point, the hi-hats are playing in the verse and the chorus, and they're still closed in the chorus. Whereas maybe a drummer would go to a ride or open the hi-hat slightly to create a textural difference. And there were a couple of places where there weren't crash hits to define section changes, which is a very drummer thing. And then actually, as you evolve as a drummer, you learn actually you don't need a crash on every, start of every section. I can't remember if I overdubbed any crash cymbals in the track on this one. Probably not, because I was in Pro Tools, and that's not as easy as it is in Logic to do. So yeah, it's not really a secret. I mean, I added samples to the samples.
Okay.
Ironically.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But then the drums go through an analog chain of mine, and I've got a pretty fixed analog chain that works for me and does heavily contribute to my sound. Yep. That's not to say analog is better than plugins, but for me it works, which is I can show you the session in a bit when we load that up. But I have a drums shells bus for the kick, snare, and the toms, and then a cymbals bus for everything else, all the metal round things.
Yep.
And the drum shells bus goes out through my pair of API 550B EQs.
Yes,
make the low end rich, give it that girth that the kick drum has.
That was one of the secrets. I thought I give myself some credit there. Yeah, I thought that. I'd guessed 550s as well, by the way.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah. And then that went into my Serpent Audio SB 4001 stereo compressor, which is like an SSL G comp kind of thing. And then that goes into my IGS Rubber Bands mastering EQ, which is basically their version of a Pultec, and that's just got this thick, juicy low end and really kind of polishy top end. So I would have been bringing out a bit of 10K on the snare drum with that, taking out some low mids, about 500 or 700 on the APIs, and then kind of compressing for energy. One of the most important things I've ever learned about compression is you can use a compressor to place things forward or backwards in a mix, depending on attack and release time combinations. I won't go into those now because it's going to be a long video.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a great video, not to plug someone else's YouTube channel, Mike, but Hardcore Studios, Justin does a fantastic video on compression on his channel. And also you can use compression, and this is something I do in mastering a lot, is you can use it to create energy depending on where the transients are and how early you clamp down on those or how quick you have the release settings. So there would have been some careful listening to getting a vibe and a bit of a lilt going with the drums, which I think came out really well on this track.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, drum bus compression.
So because I've the drum on the shells bus, there would be a clipper as well, just to control peak transients. On the drum bus, which would have been fed by the cymbals as well, I don't think I'd have added more compression. There'd have been a gentle API 2500 compressor on the cymbals, bit of EQ, but you have to be careful about phase shifting.
That was my second guess, was the 2500 as well.
Mike, you're winning. You should be doing this professionally.
No, only because no, I guess not really a guess, but I honestly had only started using the 2500 on drum buses. Not you just mentioned on the cymbals there, but I've used it on a couple of whole drum buses, and really without knowing much about the compressor, I've gone, Jesus, that was good. With some very simple settings, you know.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up Pro Tools now. So if I take my left ear off, it's because I'm getting some weird delay on my end.
Cool.
And then I can basically walk you through this, which might be better from a visual point of view. That's going to take a few seconds because Pro Tools is Neanderthalically slow.
Okay. Well, folks, if you want to say hi or ask Ed anything in the chat, please do. This is quite interesting for me, so I'm loving it, picking his brains. But yeah, let me know in the chat actually how many of you are using real drums and how many are using, what do we call them? Fake drums, not fake.
Well, one of your Facebook group members, Sal Cerise, reached out after you posting your video, and you kindly let me post about my services in the Facebook group, and I worked with him on a mix, and his drum sounded very similar to yours, and I thought, okay, what's he done there? I can't remember them. There's basically an AI website that you program in a song, or you upload a song and then it'll use AI to create a bass part for you and a drum part.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's what he used. Sorry if I got that wrong, Sal. But I was fascinated by that because it delivers you the stems and the good sounding samples, and the AI's created a drum part. Again, it's not quite as authentic, I would say, as a real person. But in terms of getting songs together, it programmed his bass and his drums, and it was, I mean, what a time to be alive when tools like that are around, so we can put songs out when we can't play the instruments. I mean, for me, who's harmonically challenged at best as a drummer, it's probably quite a useful tool I should probably get on. Right, let me share my screen. Let's go. Right, let's go Superman. So, are we seeing some blue stuff on screen?
Let me bring that up one moment. Here we go. Oh, look at this. All right. We're not going to get super detail, but we can use it as a little bit of a reference. Talk colours to me.
Are you seeing lots of channel faders right now? Seeing a mix window?
We are, yes. Okay. Yes.
So I'm not talking through the wrong window. So I'm a little bit lazy with color coding in Pro Tools, other than drums are always blue. Bass is always brown, acoustics.
Bass is always brown for me too.
Electrics are always green. Acoustics are sometimes yellow, but in this case I was clearly lazy. And then every other instrument goes colors, and vocals are always purple. And then effects, I try and color. Oh yeah, this is a bit of an older session, so I was being a bit lazy with coloring. So the structure basically is kick drums are going into a kick, snare drums are going into a snares bus, toms into down the bottom here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, I can. Okay. Yeah,
great.
Just about.
And then hi-hats go into a hi-hats bus, overheads into an overheads bus, rooms into a rooms bus, with the idea that I can just control each part of the kit, and then that goes further into a drums go into a shells bus. So, oh, maybe I didn't do what I said I did. Ah, okay, right. So the drum bus processing was on the actual drum bus itself. Sometimes I split it, so I do the shells compression separately, but this time I did it all together. And then, can you see that Fab Filter plugin?
I can't see that it's Fab Filter. I don't
all right,
think we
let
can
me
see
share
that much
a
detail.
different
But
window, because you need to see the entire screen, I think. All right, can you see the Fab Filter plugin now?
Let me bring it up. Yes, we can. Yep, cool.
Great stuff. So you can see audio going because Pro Tools thinks that I'm recording into it right now. Which I'm obviously not. But so a little notch at 160 roughly for some resonance. Then the drums are going to a drums parallel bus, which is that'll be under my effects thing.
What's the parallel bus being used for?
The parallel drum bus is basically a band pass,
Right.
just to control the top end and the low end there. And then that's going into a distressor for some heavy parallel compression.
Cool. Right. Yep.
And there's also a parallel drum saturator, which is the thermionic culture MIDI, which is adding some crunch. And I think that is possibly I dare say maybe one of the more audible differences between your drums and my drum. Just something as simple as parallel saturation, just add a bit of grit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say that stands out to me as, oh yeah, I'm going to try that now. Okay. That's cool. Can I just quickly explain to people, just in case they don't know, just going to quickly explain to people that, so what's happening here is with parallel processing, folks, you're going to send something through to a bus. And in this case, basically, although the saturation is being added, it's parallel compression. He was using the distressor there for that. And normally you'll quite strongly compress something, okay? Meaning that you're really squashing the loud parts and the quieter parts are coming up quite significantly in comparison. Normally, I don't know exactly what we've done here because I can't look at the settings, and then folks, what you'd normally do is blend in that bus, and it kind of it helps to keep what should we say, Ed, parallel compression. It just makes sure nothing really sinks below a certain line at any point. I guess the way I think of it anyway. Perhaps you can see it in a different way, Ed, but
I see it as an energy creation tool, and also it just thickens out the whole sound. It's definitely something all the top guys are using. So yeah, I've got that dialed in at about -20, which is irrelevant if we don't know the gain of the distressor, but without seeing what's going into it, I can't tell what that is.
What was your rate? Let me just have a quick look at your distressor settings there. I just want to see your ratio. Oh, 6:1. Okay.
That's gentle, to be honest. Sometimes I'll slam that.
Gentle. Yeah.
Again, it's to taste. This is something I will do in solo, actually, which I know is frowned upon, but I will tweak this in solo, and then I'll blend it in, obviously, not in solo.
Note here, guys, that he has got the mix all the way up to the compressor fully, and that's because it's on a bus. And you can use the bus to sort of blend in with your original signal. I've never used distressor as in line as an insert, but I guess you could, and then just use that for parallel compression on the fly if you use that mix control. But anyway, yeah, carry on. That's good. Interesting.
So the drums then, well, hang on, let's go back. So then we've got the bass, that goes to a bass bus. Acoustic guitars, they go to an acoustic bus. Electric guitars go to a guitar bus, etc., for every instrument. You get the idea.
Yep.
And then the instruments are all going to an instrument bus here, and all the vocals go to a vocals bus, and most of the effects go to the effects bus. I say most because sometimes I group things together. I think the snare drum goes through the drum bus. Snare drum reverbs, I think, go through the drum bus processing. Just a matter of what mood I'm in, whether
really similar to the way.
Right. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Whether I
very
think I need the control over the reverbs or not.
very similar to the way I'd organise a session myself, to be honest with you, especially with the instruments all going through to one bus and the vocals being on a
Yeah.
separate
So
bus.
this
Do
is
you put all the vocals there or just the lead vocals on that all vox?
so I have a lead vocal bus. I then have a lead vocal volume bus because I will then automate the volume of the vocal sections without affecting any of the processing. And then a backing vocal bus and, maybe an ad-lib bus or a choir bus, for example. And they all eventually go into the all Vox bus. So these are my final 3 purple ones
Sure.
here. And then from there, I do some processing on the instrument bus to help stand the vocals out. And this is a hugely helpful technique. So on the instrument bus, I have Soothe. Pro Tools has this thing where it just doesn't load sometimes. Plugins. And so Soothe is doing. Go away. Oh yeah. Joys of working between doors. You have to press different things. So Soothe doing both of them are a wide pass, like a wide EQ curve set clean to the vocal bus. So this is happening on the instruments. So I don't do too much of this. What have we got going on here? Okay, so about a decibel. That's about as much as I would dare go. It's the same on Soothe. So Soothe is getting rid of like resonant notches in the instruments that are clashing with the vocals. So for example, that'll be harmonics and anything slightly not brittle, because that shouldn't be in the mix, but things that might potentially clash with the sibilance and the diction of the vocal. Soothe is catching that and just dipping those out, but only when the vocals are performing. And the filter one is just doing a bit more of a generic broadband EQ. I guess I could use a multi-band compressor for this, but I don't want to give it the squashed sound of compressor would give that. I just want to alleviate the frequencies that the vocals are dominant some space. So it's very subtle, but once you start using it, I guarantee you'll hear every mix on the radio and on Spotify.
Sure.
It's a majestic technique for separating instruments and vocals. And then on the, I've got a pre-master again before the master output, because I do some automation on the pre-master, such as pushing the chorus a decibel and using some, I think, what have I got going on here with Ozone. So with Ozone, this goes pretty much on the everything for 2 reasons. One, because a lot of nice processors that I just tuck in the scruffy edges of a mix. And also I use the equalizer as basically a checking system. So I'll draw up whatever I think the track is in. What did I put? I can't remember. Rock. Okay. So we went for the rock preset. Ozone decided that I needed to do a bit of that EQ in the mix, but I ignored that. So that gives me a reference to where the mix is in comparison to other tracks. So it's a good test if you think, okay, like for example, if you're mixing on only one set of headphones or only one set of speakers, the likelihood is you'll be mixing for what sounds good on those only, but the likelihood is that might not be the right EQ curve on other systems.
Sure.
And this is where mixed translation is a minefield of of pain, which Paul Third and I heavily on the Work in Audio Tools podcast at the moment.
Yeah. I must admit,
I
make really good use of, in almost everything I do, of Isotope's tonal balance. Just because I'm although I think their algorithms for that are pretty old now, but similar to what you're showing, that tonal balance is included in there. I also use a separate plugin. I just think that when your ears are getting when your ears are getting pretty fatigued and stuff, it's just sometimes you just can't trust them anymore. And if you just need to get something out, I never follow it completely. Sometimes I'll look at results and go, nah, that's wrong.
Yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, absolutely.
They don't know what they're on about. But just most of the time it's like if I'm lacking confidence, if I feel like I'm just not hearing it anymore, or of course I know there are parts of my mixing environment which are flawed, no matter how much I've used room correction and things. I know there are flaws in my room in certain frequencies, so it's kind of useful for that to get me. I still check it I do still check it on other systems, but it can get me there a little bit quicker anyway. I like those sort of tools. I think we better move on. We were sort of started off on drums there, and I think I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I think we better move.
Hopefully this is interesting and helpful. Just quickly, there's one more plugin I would talk about, which is
go for it. Yeah,
God Particle, which goes on the master bus.
Oh,
so what this is doing, use the limiter setting. It's got this gauge here, which tells you how mid-range and high-end hitting to hit most masters. It's just another metering option. There's other things I will use for that.
Interesting.
But it's what God Particle is basically is a parallel processor. So it's bringing in a parallel amount of young on this dial here. Now, what Jason told us at Abbey Road in person is that 100% is actually like bringing in a parallel processing chain 50%. So if you wanted it at 100%, you'd have to turn it to 200. So I have that at between 60 and 70, and that's just, anyone should demo this plug. It's genius. It does a lot under the hood for you, but if you bring that in from 50 to 100% on the dial, that is, or which would be 25 to 50% in reality, it just thickens out. It just adds this weight and this girth to a mix that just makes it sound more professional. That's the only way I can describe it.
I think I know where I'll be going after we finish this. Okay, that's interesting.
So Jason can thank me for the extra sales he's getting on that.
Awesome. Okay, so the next thing that as I mentioned earlier, that I was pleased with the mix, although because I was quite attached to my own mix, and I'm talking about the vocals. Which obviously as a singer you're very attached to, so you've got an emotional attachment really to this thing, because I've processed my own voice so much over the years, I've got to know what I like in terms of chains and things. So and I think the production of the vocals was quite different in some ways, with your mix to the way it was on mine. So I'm interested to know, let's just talk vocal chain to begin with. I should mention, I suppose, in case anyone's interested, that I recorded it in a really simple way, using a U87 and straight into my audio interface. Although I sometimes use compressors and things on the way in, on this occasion I remember I didn't. It was a quick setup. I was in a rush, so straight into the audio interface. And so that was it with the vocals in terms of the way I recorded it. Just that. Recorded in this very room, I think. I think so, anyway. Yeah, in this room. I used to have to I'm going to sidetrack a little bit, Ed. Years ago, I spent probably about $3,000 building a vocal booth in my studio.
Wow.
And it took a long time to do it as well. And I didn't know much back then, and it was really dead. It was super, super dead. It was one of those things, if you've ever gone into a super dead room and it'll be the first time in your life you clap your hands and you don't hear anything bouncing. It's the weirdest little sort of sound, right? It doesn't sound like a clap. It was like that in there. And I eventually sold it, because I was moving, and I got rid of it. And I never felt I ever wanted to build one again or have one again, because I like to record in a room which has got a little bit of life in it with vocals. And I know lots of people go in their cupboards and, have all the clothes and really have a super dead sound. I guess the idea is, you can treat it afterwards. But these I think I recorded in here, which has got a little bit of life in the room. It's not super dead. I like that, but can cause problems, of course, but that's the way I like to record now. Anyway, carry on, Ed. What did you do?
So vocal wise, I can see already my process is a bit different. I think the beauty of mixing is it's constantly an evolving process. So it's interesting to go back into this session and see that snapshot in time. Now, you may notice this top plugin. awkward. Yeah, there may have been a little bit of auto tune.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Don't take offense at that, because this goes on
No,
everyone's vocals. I'll put an auto tune even on my vocals when they've been melodined, because again, it's not a tuning thing. You sing great. It's just tucking in the little, the fringes to just give it that more professional sound. Sadly, audio is heavily auto tuned, and it's just the sound. It's a bit like quantizing drums. Pros and cons, but 99.9% of stuff you hear on Spotify is gridded to within an inch of its life, so it's kind of just expected. And then straight out into an analog vocal chain, which is my go-to, which I'm going through right now for my voiceover, so I hope it's terrible. Vocal chain it goes into a DBX 520 de-esser. Now I'm realizing this has a sound, and it's either this or the following, which was the Stam Audio SA3A. One of those has a sound, and I'm not quite sure I like it anymore, so I need to audition which one it is, and maybe get rid of one of them. And then that would have gone into the Marg EQ4. Now the Marg EQ4 UA, and I think Brainworks do versions of that as a plugin. It's fantastic. It goes on every vocal of mine and every backing vocal, mainly for the air gain, the very high band that I'll set to usually 20 kilohertz. So not necessarily in the audible vocal range, but when you push it, it does slope from about 1K, I think, up to 20K, and it just breathes life into the vocal. So I think when you came back and said more air, I think that was the band I went to, and I cranked it. I was like, yeah.
yeah. A lot more air. I don't mind hearing a few breaths and things as well.
Yeah, breaths are an interesting. Again, this is something I have to have a conversation with the client about. I can't remember if we discussed this or not. Some people want the breaths totally removed, in which case I either do that manually or use Sonable Smart Gate, which is fantastic. Or they want the breaths in, but they want them lower in volume, in which case Waves D-Breath is still the one for that. I find the Nectar stuff from Isotope, the RX stuff, sorry. Is it Nectar or RX? I can't remember. It's so processing heavy that you can't use it in real time. So you have to print and then realign the audio, which is a ball ache. So I just don't use it.
I like the breaths, but what I do is I keep the breath on the lead vocal, but I take them out of the backing vocals, because what I become sensitive to is, like, you got 6 backing vocals and you don't hear
yeah.
And if they're panned, it's like ping-ponging around you. So weird. So
that's a great tip. That's one of those great details. I'm glad you said that really separates an average production from a good one. Those little attention to details of removing breaths and even sibilants as well. I will DS backing vocals to get the consonants out of the way. So again, you've not got a flamming effect or a Mexican wave of.
I do it on those sibilant letters. Well, now for about the last 2 or 3 years, I actually use Vocaline with that, because if they all hit at a slightly different time. I know people say, if it's a good singer and all that, and it's true, you can get really tight vocal groups who are super well rehearsed and they'll all nail all those things at the same time. But not me. So I tied it up. I don't mind saying so. That's what I love using those tools. You can go overboard, which I'm glad with Vocaline they have a sort of a tightness control on there, so that it's not too tight, and it sounds a little human. But I do tidy it up a little bit with that, and sometimes and also with sibilants. I do use a de-esser, but when I'm doing Susie's vocals, she can be very, very sibilant at times. It's very hard for me. At times, she gets a little whistle through her teeth as well. At times, which is So
the U87 will capture all that,
which absolutely accentuates that. Yeah, that's right. So recently, I've been tidying one up are going. I've used it before, but I've gone back to using Melodyne with they've got a sibilance thing in there, and but this is very surgical. I'll go in into individual sibilances and adjust the control to not get rid of them, but just get them to exactly the volume I want them to be.
Yeah, there's a great plugin from WA Productions. There's a few from them. Kick Shaper is available for treating kick drum, bass, and toms, and controlling resonance and sustain. Great on 808s. There's also a Vocal Shaper plugin and a D-Res plugin, which is a surgical version of Soothe, which is really good for de-essing, stuff like that. And Soothe as well is good for de-essing. I mean, Soothe is just one of those standard plugins because it's so useful. Having said that, I've not got it on your vocals here, so I clearly didn't need it.
Oh, we'll go have a look at their vocal chain now. But let me just quickly say, because it's just come to my mind, we're in this YouTube world of mixing. We talk a lot about mixing, and there's not much glory in talking about editing. But I've got to tell you, I really see the value in editing before mixing, right? It makes such a world of difference to the final outcome. Maybe I should do a whole video on that one, actually. Because it just, all these little details, I know probably to people watching you think, who wants to do all that? But what you can do in half an hour to a vocal with just some editing is well worth the time investment, well worth it,
100%. And I would say those editing is a production job, in my opinion. So quantizing drums, crossfading edits, editing out breaths if you don't want. If you've got a guitar amp recording, there's a break of 8 bars, but you can hear the guitar humming, kind of that last, and then get rid of the humming in the 8 bars. It isn't there. It's just, otherwise the mix engineer is going to have to do it, and that's going to take his time away from actually. So if you can deliver files that have been edited, it'll save the mix engineer time, but also it's those little details that take an average production to a good production, which means a mix can go from being good to great, in my opinion. So well said.
All right, and let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this vocal chain while I have a good old cough. Excuse me.
So DBX for the de-essing at the start of the chain, analog, then some compression on the Stam 3A. I'd really like an LA2A. That's in the pipe dream. Even the Audioscape one I heard at Gearfest recently is unbelievable. And then into the Marg for some EQ. This changes. Sometimes I'll do this after some processing.
Yep.
Clearly, I've done this before in this case. So Ceilings of Sound, that plugin is going to look irrelevant right now. That's
got a bit of tilt going on there.
It's default. So annoyingly, that's set itself to a default for some reason.
Okay.
But normally that would show these blue lines as an EQ curve that is opposite the natural EQ curve of the voice. So Ceilings of Sound, the guy to speak to about this is Paul Third. He's obsessed with this. You EQ to pink noise and brown noise and different variations of or different degrees between the two, shall I say. So white noise is an even number of an even amount of every frequency, and it goes and it sounds horrible. Pink noise is a pleasing amount to the human ear of all the frequency range, and brown noise is a bit more kind of softer in the top and a bit more low end oriented. So EQing something to pink noise is really nerdy. It's a bit of a faff, but I was obviously doing it at this stage. I've actually moved away because I just go with my ears now. But an alternative to this is Sonable Smart EQ4. Again, brilliant plugin, and I'm more inclined to use that at the moment. Where basically it's taking a voice and analyzing it and telling you, okay, well, like in my voice, for example, I've EQ'd out 2 kilohertz by 6 decibels before you're hearing it now. My voice is so it's horrible. So Ceilings of Sound will tell you that, okay, you're really squeaky and irritating, and it'll give you an opportunity to EQ that out.
Oh, interesting.
Paul will probably shoot me for that explanation, but that's what it does for me.
No worries.
Then Pro Q3, I think that's reset itself.
Are
I
we
may
still
have
in the
used
vocal
that.
chain here?
Yeah, because
It's an
or
interesting
have I done
curve.
some? Yeah, I know, and there's no high pass filtering, so I'm wondering if I've missed something.
Yeah, I was going to say, where's the high pass?
Okay, right. So hang on.
Oh, hang on. We're not supposed to
We've
always put a
missed.
high
We've
pass.
missed a stage. We
All
have
right,
missed a
okay.
stage.
Let's
So
go.
right. So there was smart gate on the. So this is the actual channel here. Sorry, this purple one.
Yeah.
And then so cool. So vocal rider is
Yep.
this trick's great. You can use it live and use it to write the automation. So if you've got loud bits and then quiet bits, this will even that out. So you can have to do too much because it can be very
All right.
audible if you have a large dynamic range in a vocal delivery. This will even that out, not to use it more than 6 decibels of boosting and reduction. More than that, and I think it sounds.
Is this the only automation you used?
On the vocals, so I've done this on. So you've got the verse vocal here, this one, and the chorus vocal. So I've done this on each part, and then the bus will get automated depending on the section. So if I need a bit more volume in the chorus. So vocal rider, I'm glad we checked this. Pro Q3, and here we have the
there we go. That's what we expected to see.
I
was going to say that looks like the other one looked a bit okay.
So high pass filter, some low mid control there, and this is almost essential pre-compression. Otherwise, you get a build-up of low mids, and the compressor is going to be activated by the low mids first rather than the top end, and you just get a woofy sound. So yeah, that's, and then a couple of bits there. I mean, and then a low pass filter as well. And a lot of people think, oh, hang on, why have you done a low pass filter and then put loads
I was going to ask you that
before on? Well, this is kind of just shaving the unpleasant parts. I mean, on a lot of vocals, this will be down at 14 kilohertz. Certainly, my mentor who does a lot of rap and grime stuff, he's like, yeah, vocals don't need anything above 14. It's just it's not necessarily an audible thing, but there's just something bringing that in that helps a vocal sit right in a mix.
Yep.
And then if you want the air, you can add that back in later.
Sure.
Obviously, this is pretty hard. Like, by the time you're at like 30 kilohertz, there's nothing in the signal, but it's obviously a slope, so it's not an immediate cutoff at 24 decibels per octave.
Looks like you've got something there in the sibilance range as well. A little bit of a notch there. Where
yeah,
that's
that probably
6K.
Yeah, pretty much 6K.
Yeah.
And so,
but have you used the de-esser as well, or?
So no, not in this one.
Okay, cool.
But there is a de-esser further down the line after all the processing. There we go. Can't really tell you what it's doing other than it's doing something between 6K and 7.
Yep.
And then Waves MV2, just to bring up a little bit of the low level again, thicken the voice out. I would love to be able to demo all this on and off, but Pro Tools is tricky for that with live streaming, and I would need a very expensive software that I refuse to pay for to do this effectively. So I can't do that. So yeah, vocal chain in essence, gating for the breaths, vocal rider for the automation, Pro Q3 EQ from Fab Filter, which is industry standard for a reason. High pass to whatever that was, 150, and dynamically control those low mids.
One of those plugins that I think, with Pro Q3, where I really feel like for home studio enthusiasts, it's quite an expensive plugin to buy.
Yeah, it is.
I will say, us YouTubers get sent a fair amount of plugins for free, but Fab Filter aren't like that. They don't give you anything for free. So I've had to buy my Fab Filter stuff for sure, but really it's sort of an investment, to be honest with you. It's just sort of slam dunk EQ. Yeah, I've got everything I need. Well, not everything you need in EQ, because obviously you know, it doesn't add color at all, but yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
very
we could
clean.
get into a debate about whether analog EQ plugins are a scam or not, but let's leave that to another show.
Yep. There are cheapers of Pro Q3. The Waves F6 plugin is also a dynamic EQ, and dynamic EQs are your best friend in so many situations.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Melda
Yeah.
Productions have a dynamic one that's definitely cheaper than Fab. Again, you know, Soothe, Fab Filter, you know, what else is there? God Particle. There's a reason these are just industry standards with all the top guys. They're just.
I did a free one the other day, which I made a video on, which they've obviously taken inspiration from Pro Q3, and it's pretty decent. I mean, not as smooth, and you know, I mean, it's not just Fab Filter in terms of the design and the features. It runs really well as well. It's just glorious to use in that way. It's obviously programmed extremely well. Anyway, enough singing the praises of Pro Q3. But folks, if you're ever on the fence about that, just grab it when the sales are on. You know, during Black Friday and stuff. And I'll say you won't regret it. You'll never.
Oh, you'll use it the rest of your life. I mean, it's ridiculous. So vocal wise, then I get processing. So again, this is a trick I nicked off Paul Third, my podcast co-host. He does. I've always done vocal, and that is this one here. So this is a vocal chain that I'm dialing in at minus 10 dB. Bandpass, so we're cutting out the muddy low end and the sibilant things that may clash with the lead. For example, this is a really good technique. A singer with a high-pitched voice, and that, you know, or someone who sings at the back of their throat, and everything they do sounds a bit like that. You know, musical theatre singers come to mind who. You know,
I like the impersonation you did of them there. That was good. Yeah. Okay.
The higher registers. So warmth in, you could, you know, do this at say between 200 and 1,000, and bring in all the warmth of a vocal in parallel. But I have it in let's just go back. I have it in quite a wide setting, and there's two reasons for this. One, it adds just weight to the vocal. And secondly, it also you can automate it and bring this up in the chorus. I think first I just leave that flat, but I automate. Sometimes I automate. So we also have a left and right parallel, and nerdy. So I will use a variation of compression, but this is hitting pretty hard. Those don't look extremes, but I guarantee that is almost minus 20. Wow. And this is literally a parallel compressor with no EQ. But with a gate to catch any vocal stuff or any compression circuitry noise with the makeup gain. Even in the plugins, they model them so well that they model stuff you actually don't want in the plug.
I wish they'd just have a switch to switch off the noise, added noise.
But simple, but boggles me why they don't. So I've actually gated those so in between the vocals there's not the going, and the hard left and right. And typically I would bring them in for the chorus, automate them in the chorus lifts and opens up some more. So that's parallel compression. Fairchild on the main one is good for that. That's very warm. And then I've got, so my go-to processors are a short reverb, and this one is really short sustain and really short pre-delay. So it's felt more than heard. You won't necessarily hear this reverb, but if you took it away, something would be missing. That's my short reverb. Then I have a longer reverb that's the audible one. That again, I'll automate up in the choruses. Then I'll have a slap delay, which is almost like a slightly longer reverb. Some presence. It's not necessarily, you're not necessarily hearing the delay, but it's again giving it some weight. And I'll typically automate that again. You also automated this in for the third verse, so it was audible, just to create a
I was going to say,
textural
I
change.
definitely felt that you had automated that, because that delay wasn't present throughout the whole thing for sure. So,
Well, then we get the full-on
or it's
delay
more
with
audible. It
delay
sounds
that everyone is
Mm.
thinking of delay, which I will have as a ping pong stereo delay more often than not to create some movement, and that will be out of the verses completely and then come in for the choruses.
Mm-hmm.
See
To
what
create some
delays I'm
drama.
using. Yeah, so short reverb, Fab Filter Pro R2. When this came out, basically made every other reverb redundant for me. It's so versatile. I can do everything with
Okay,
it.
it's interesting. I've never used it, so there you go.
I know that's just stereo reverb. I don't know why that's not for a vocal. Okay, short reverb. Yeah, so still Pro R2, but very short pre-delay. Long reverb R2 again. Longer reverb, longer. I used to have vintage reverb exclusively for that, which still sounds great, but just R2 is so easy to use. And then the slap again, R2. This is not very good for plugin diversity, is it? And then delay. What did I use here? Oh, so I've experimented on this one with
Tape
the
echo.
UAD Galaxy Tape Echo, which is good. There's also an SSL delay that they've got that I've used. It's absolutely brilliant. But I keep forgetting about these other ones. You know when you have your defaults and your templates, and then you just forget that they're available.
I know.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I've got like 30 reverbs, and I use 2.
Yeah. So that's vocals.
By the way, I'll sort of say to people who are watching this and in the mix, because I think everyone probably starts off when they're mixing using like one reverb, and then they figure out they should put it on a bus, and then eventually you can. I mean, I don't think you have to do anything, but it makes sense to start using different types of spatial effects for different stages. And the only thing I'd say, because we haven't got much time to delve into all of these, but the only thing I would say is don't rush off now and put like 5 reverbs on your vocal just for the sake of it, because Ed does it. Do everything with a purpose. So there will be a purpose to each reverb that's been put in here. For me, like the maximum I'd normally go to on a vocal is like 3 or something. That's all the purpose I've got. But I've seen people use like 5 different reverbs at different stages for vocals.
Yeah, some people have a verse reverb,
stuff.
a chorus reverb, mediums. I mean, I literally use the same 2 reverbs and 2 delays.
Yep.
Not the same in every mix, but those are the 4 effects, my go-tos.
Sure. So, I just would be careful for people to think, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong. I need 4 reverbs on my vocal. It's like, no, do it if that's what you want, but do everything with a purpose. Think about what each reverb is doing and how it's serving what it's doing. Anyway, carry on. Well,
that's the vocal chain. I mean,
Cool.
there's
Awesome.
there's a lot going on, but fundamentally, it's sent me a verse and a chorus vocal, so they were processed similarly and gain staged, so I could hit the analog at the same level between the vocals and the verse and the chorus, and then that was automated later for volume after the processing.
And I will say that
and effects really looks complicated, but it's actually quite simple.
It's not complicated, but I will say that I did record the verse and the choruses separately, and I'm trying not to do that. As I've said before, mostly 90% of what I'm doing, I'm recording myself and Susie. And Susie's going a bit nuts with me asking her to record things in bits, and she wants to sing a whole performance, which I totally get. So we're trying to do whole performances when we can, but sometimes there's such a big difference in what you're requiring from a chorus compared to a verse that I just prefer to record them separately. I don't know, let me know in the chat, folks, what you prefer to do. So I think definitely with this one, it would have been that it would have been a dynamics thing. I would have been singing so much louder in the chorus than I would have done than I was in the verse. That Yeah, I know I could obviously use mic technique and move in and out and all that, but it doesn't always quite make sense, and you won't quite get it right. So I prefer just to set up and there's a different sound obviously when you're moving away from a mic. You're obviously getting proximity effect and all that, and sometimes I want that different sound as well for the chorus as opposed to the verse. So I think on this one I wanted right up here for that verse sound, and then close to yelling for the chorus. So.
And that's a good technique to do, because in the verse, you might be very soft and using a lower register, more of an ASMR kind of sound. And then if you're belting high notes, the tendency is to go further back in your throat, and you lose low end in your voice when you go higher. It's just physics of vocals. So you may need to tweak on the way in, and definitely, as you've said, dynamically, a verse is going to be down here, and a chorus might be absolutely belting 20 decibels louder, which is going to destroy any compression settings you have. So it is worth doing them both. Yeah, I do that, and then backing vocals.
And at the same time, in my humble opinion, I think Susie's absolutely right. If you can, like if the song is well rehearsed enough, if you can get a singer to sing all the way through, like 3 times, do a bit of comping later, but try and capture that sort of continuity. I think it's an emotional thing, to be honest with you, to try and the singer's in that moment and they're flowing through the emotion of a song. Whereas when you're just sort of dropping in on a third verse and trying to just do that by itself, you're not always like in the moment with the emotion of the song, in my opinion anyway. So I can see why she wants to do it.
So I do all the verses at the same time, because usually with the verse you've got a repetitive flow, and you're following consonant movements, and I don't know the technical name for it. And also you're in one register and usually warming up at that point. And then in the chorus, then I'll sing all the choruses when I've warmed up and belt a bit more, and the chorus is down in my mind, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, I can develop that in the second chorus by doing this, and develop it in the third chorus. And then usually when I'm really warmed up, I'll go and do the verses again, because the first time I do the verse won't be that great. And then backing vocals and ad-libs will be on another day, because I'll have spent 4 hours on it at this point and be absolutely destroyed.
I will try and keep to the performances as few as possible now. I usually try and, I know we shouldn't really be talking about this. I'm so busy, right? But I usually try to keep my engineering tasks separate from my vocals, especially with vocal. So I'll set up the microphones and everything and do a check and everything set up the night before, and then go away and then just be a vocalist the next day who just has to hit record. So I'm not in 2 states of mind at the same time. And drink lots of water beforehand, have a good night's sleep, and I gargle virgin olive oil as well. And sometimes a little bit of what do you call it? The asthma thing that I have, puffer, helps me a little bit as well. Yeah. And then if I can do it all in 3 takes, I'm happy chappy. Yeah. I don't want to be toiling away.
For like 8 takes of each one and then comp.
Yeah, it just gets a little bit tiresome for me now if I'm doing 8, 9.
It's a laborious process.
Yeah, it's just and then it just by those later takes you're just over it and fed up with it and frustrated, and you start to focus in on stupid little details that you probably shouldn't be too concerned with in your voice. So. But yeah, inhaler. That's right. E short.
There is something to be said for that level of attention to detail, and often what I'm doing is I'm trying to just solidify the phrasing, because being a drummer, it's when I first started singing, weirdly I was surprised how bad my vocal timing was when I started singing. Being a drummer, you'd think it was good, but I then got tight at singing, but then everything was so rhythmic. I had to learn to become a singer and move the phrasing away.
Be a bit loose, yeah.
Yeah. So again, when I'm doing 8 takes, kind of working on that a bit as well. Anyway, let's get back. Any more questions?
Yeah. I'm good on that. There was
close my screen.
See, I think you can actually. Well, there's one more. The final thing we're going to do is talk about guitars. I was a bit surprised to see. I was a little bit surprised to see this comment from the Mix Club. Mike is a killer guitar player. I definitely think killer might be going too far. I was thinking competent might be. I'll take competent, but I'll have a little something to say about my guitar playing before we actually talk about the mixing of it. But before we do that, I mustn't forget actually a little word from the sponsor. You get to release your music directly to some of the best platforms on the planet. We're talking Spotify, iTunes, TikTok, Amazon, all of the household names. And you don't need to open any accounts there because DistroKid does all of that for you. Now, once you've created your master and your album artwork, it's as easy as filling in a friendly form, uploading them, and DistroKid takes care of the rest. All for one flat annual fee, and DistroKid takes none of your royalties. Sign up with my VIP link in the description and you'll get an extra 7% off. So thanks Ed for being here on this. We're going to finish soon just with his final guitar part, and I just want to remind people, as well as that DistroKid link in the description down below, also a link to Ed's mixing services. And I know some people from the community have used your mixing services and been really pleased with the results as well, so I'm happy to tell people about it. Now the reason I'm surprised to see that about my guitar playing is because when I'm talking about tracking this song, the guitars took so much longer than everything else. I had a really clear idea in my head about how I want the track to sound, but I lack so much confidence. I'm fine with an acoustic guitar in my hand, but as soon as it's electric guitar, I completely lack confidence in what I do. I'm just not a great axe hero, but what I do try and do is write melodic things, guitar parts, and I like a bit of harmony with the lead guitar part. So that's what I did with this. It was just tried to be a bit anthemic in my approach, and I think it's cool because I like listening to guitar solos which have a good melody to them, so I don't mind the fact that I haven't got an amazing technique. So if you're a pretty ordinary guitar player like me, folks, that's okay. Work with what you've got and
You're
just go.
so humble, Mike.
No, really, it's seriously.
One of your endearing factors.
But just go for a little bit of just think about, ordinary listeners don't always need you to be an amazing guitarist. Just a good melody as the guitar solo can really fulfill people when they're listening to it. And just with a very basic technique, you can focus on your writing more than anything. Anyway, but it was a problem for me because I had lots of I was just not confident in it, and I don't do much lead guitar playing at all. And when it came to this, I recorded the guitar parts and I completely deleted them all. I think I recorded, I've got about 6 layers, and I completely deleted them. And I was lacking in confidence so much that I actually put an orchestra solo in there. I wrote this whole orchestral thing as the solo. It wasn't because what's the song needed, it was just my lack of confidence. And that's what I did, and I spent 3 weeks on it or something. And then Susie gave me some feedback and she was like, really? That sounds shit. I was like, okay, thanks, Suze. She said, why don't you, that should be like a lead guitar. And I was like, yeah, but I'm just not pulling it off. I don't like what I'm doing. And the thing that helped, and the reason I'm telling this long story, is because we do spend so much time in the studio. And what helped was I performed all the parts and she sat there like an audience member in front of me, and as I played them. And that made all of the difference. Immediate feedback, she was like, nah, do that again, that wasn't quite good. And then when I did it, and she was like, nah, that one sounded better. Keep that one. Just getting that immediate feedback, but also just having someone in front of me to keep me on my toes. And I don't know, it's a different experience. I really thought it was a benefit. And I think that I would recommend that to people. Sometimes you might think, I don't want anyone else around. But at times, if you have at least one audience member in front of you, it can just give you a bit of life. It can give you a bit of energy. So that's what I was reasonably, I won't say I was happy with the guitar parts, the electric guitar parts. But I was like, okay, that'll do. That's good enough for me. Not too embarrassed by it. But anyway, acoustic guitar. Tell me about it, Ed.
So I've just closed the session because I saw in the comments that my audio is glitching, and that's a Pro Tools related
Probably
thing.
what it is. Yeah.
So acoustics, that was the bit I remember going back and forth about regarding compression and low mids. I mean, I'd say all the guitars sounded wonderful. You know, it was just a case of making them fit around, you know, the priorities, which are arguably the vocals, obviously, and getting acoustic. I have a really long-standing relationship with acoustic guitars, particularly, and low end and bass and pianos, because you want the. I feel like in this track, it certainly at the beginning, it needed the warmth and the intimacy of the low mids, and by
Absolutely.
low mids, I'm defining that from 150 hertz upwards. Some people would argue that's bass. Fine. For me, by low mids, I mean like the muddy frequency, so 150 to say 300, where they can clash a lot, certainly with bass guitars. I've since learned an amazing technique where you high pass the stereo EQ to say 150, and then you high pass the mid, as opposed to mid side. You high pass the mids to 300. So the bass can slot into that space, but you've still got the depth and the girth and the warmth and the width.
Sure.
Getting really nerdy with the quite advanced mixing techniques. One worth noticing. So I think it was just, I have a thing with acoustics as well, where some people will squash them completely, but I don't want to do that, because certainly with a track like this at the beginning, you know, it's a ballad, it's so intimate, and your part and playing was so expressive. I wanted to keep that, but at the same time with acoustics, you've got, you know, one note sticking out more than another here and there, and so dynamically you've got to kind of tame it a little bit, coax it into its place. But I still felt like I wanted the expression and, you know, the energy in the part, as it were. If you just squash everything, you end up with an LA rock song, and it's just everything's a bit lifeless. This song had so much passion and emotion and meaning that I was trying to capture that as much as I could, and hopefully I did a good job, because it was such a wonderful message and to convey. Hopefully I did that, but that's not just a vocal delivery thing, that is also an instrumentation delivery.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a taste thing going on there. I know that I remember now that the first couple that you sent me, it was just a simple case for me of, I can hear compression on the acoustic, especially like in the opening verse where.
Oh yeah, because we backed it off, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just guitar and vocal in the first verse. So, you know, for me personally, with those sorts of things, to give people an idea, I mean, I pretty much always use an LA2A because it's so gentle on it. And I don't want to give gain reduction numbers normally, but just give an idea. Like for me, when I'm doing it normally, it's like I'm lucky if I'm tickling like one decibel of gain reduction with an LA2A on an acoustic, because I just want to hear that instrument in the dynamics of that instrument almost completely. Having said that, it really does depend on the song, so I don't want people to go away and think, oh, you just tickle acoustics now with a little bit of compression, because, you know, if it's a full-on sort of rock song with a big, you know, acoustic on there, you might really want to compress it quite heavily. But the trick, I think, always is, not with all compression, but with a lot of compression, is getting it to that point where a listener wouldn't be aware of it. Not that listeners know what compression are, but, you know, it's just that fine line where you go, I'm not aware of any compression. It's probably about right. You know, a lot of the time.
Yeah, for me, as I said earlier, compression is placing something forward or backwards in a mix. So if you compress lots, it's naturally going to feel like it's sitting further back in a mix.
Yep.
Whereas if you don't compress it, or if you have slow attack times, it's going to feel more forward. So I think I may have even automated it in this mix, so it was sounding forward and intimate at the beginning, and then I may have squashed it a bit more and just made it sit back a little bit in the mix when other stuff came in.
Sure. I mean, I think that a lot of people like me have this little formula where you start off a song fairly gentle and then it gets bigger later on. Not all genres of music demand that, but with what I do, So I don't know whether you would have done this, but I can certainly remember when I did my version of the mix, and this would be very common for me on my songs, is I'd automate both the compression and the EQ on the acoustic. There's certainly usually, if it's starting off without any bass guitar at the beginning, then I'll let the acoustic occupy that space, and then quite aggressively EQ, almost like quite an aggressive high pass. I'll automate that as soon as a bass or even a piano comes in.
Yeah.
Certainly, and also the compression. Yeah. So this guitar in here could be, if you listen to it in isolation, you could parallel compress this and have it, pretty well compressed. You won't be aware of it in the choruses, but you could.
I can't remember if I did parallel processing. I think I did on this one for that exact reason, to thicken it out. Yeah, you can
imagine it. Yeah. I mean, for me, the acoustic guitar serves, especially in this one, because it was strummed on the chorus, or actually it was strummed all the way through. It becomes a percussive instrument as well, so it's not just a melodic instrument. There's something about the strums which adds a bit of life to the song to me. So I think, yeah. Anyway, I'm not talking about what you did, but what I like to do. But there you go. It's just.
No, it's interesting stuff. And then electric guitar wise, again, I'd have done some high passing, probably automated that depending on what comes in. And the only analog chain for that was to go through my Wes Audio Raya, which is a Vari-Mu compressor, which a Vari-Mu is similar to an Opto, and it's quite slow typically. But Wes Audio have created this Raya. It's got a big fat tube in it, and it just sounds so thick and warm. But you can affect the attack and release times, unlike an Opto where it's linear. Well, let's not go into it. You did a video on that recently, I believe. But there's a THD circuit on the Raya to add some harmonic distortion, and I think I had this on. There's a medium setting which I think is 1% THD, high is 2.5, and usually it's over the top. But because the electric guitars had this great crunch to them, well, I wanted a little bit more crunch, kind of, because they hit in the chorus and make everything sound big. I was like, right, we've got this intimate, gentle verse, and then in the chorus, there's a bit of aggression coming in the performance and in the vocals, a bit more intent, maybe is the better word than aggression.
Sure.
So yeah, on the electrics, it was, well, what can I do to emphasize that as well? So that's the only analog processing. And again, it would have just been dynamic EQs to get things out of the way of other stuff.
Sure.
There would have been a dynamic EQ on the guitar bus when the solo came in to free up space for the solo frequencies.
Yep.
All sorts of side chaining and dynamic processing. It's your best friend.
Absolutely. Look, I think this has gone quite a lot longer than I thought it would. So
not sorry.
I'm not. I mean, I'm loving it. I could sit here for bloody hours and talk about this stuff. It's really interesting. But I'm aware that I think people in the chat have said they've had cats to feed and things along the way. So it's not. It's really great that people have stuck around. Yeah, I'm glad that people have stuck around for so long. You've been wonderful in the live comments there, folks, and really nice to see you in here. And great to pick your brain, Ed. I've really enjoyed it so much. And not surprisingly, there's been a few things that I'm not surprised at, if that makes sense. I've gone, I probably would have approached this or that. And there's been a couple of little nuggets that I've picked up here where I thought, interesting. But I think it's made me a little bit aware of, I don't want to sound too big-headed, but about what we put into what we do, the way we think about it. And I'm sure people watching, care about their art as much. But one of the biggest things I got out of this was I'm enthusiastic now more often to have someone else do bits of this for me or with me. I think that's the biggest takeaway. I really enjoyed what you did. I think I'm going to come to you with some other songs soon.
Good
if you don't
Look
mind.
forward to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really. That's the biggest thing for me. It's made me realise a little bit how many things I've done in isolation all by myself, where it was really worth asking someone else to do it. Now, I will quickly shout out. I didn't put a link in the description. I will later, but I also had Streaky do the mastering as well, which is a whole other conversation. But I was pleased with what he did. And I know, Ed, you're also doing mixing and mastering as well as part of your services. Anyone, I'd say this, if you're just frustrated or just felt like you've been plodding away, I know everyone's doing mixing on this channel. If you've been going away at it and you've got a mix, for example, that you're just feeling that, it's just not quite getting there, check out what Ed might be able to do for you. Check out that link in the description down below. Even with my 20 to 30 years of mucking around doing this in the home, I felt that he was able to add, I won't say what percentage, but something that I could definitely notice the difference, a discernible difference to me at least anyway, which made me super pleased and gave me more confidence when I released the track, to be honest with you, to feel that, yeah, okay, this is ready to go out,
That's my job done then.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and
that's
so
the best feedback I can get.
Yeah, so that's been great. We are going to finish off by saying goodbye, and I'm going to play the song for you folks. Thanks so much for joining us in the show, in the live chat, and if you're watching the replay, thanks for watching all this. And Ed, I'll leave you with the final word.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been great to hang out with everyone today. I hope you got something out of it. Yeah, check out the website. I do mix mentoring as well, or consultation. That is available on the website. Follow that. And as Untapped Rhythms Production has just said, it's been emotional. So that's someone who clearly follows my videos, or the podcast at least. Thank you for that. Yeah, this has been great. Thanks for your time, everyone.
See you, folks. Bye.
Don't turn the light on too soon when I've gone. You can't pretend that you're not alone, and I have not gone. And I don't mean to go burst your bubble, but that's the trouble with truth sometimes. And I guess Superman never really ever gave a damn about Lois Lane, the Daily Planet, all the people there. He's just showing off, 'cause his parents didn't love him much, and you believed in me. You think I'm selfish, 'cause I'm not crying. The pain you're feeling, you want me to feel, but I don't feel things quite like I used to. I'm getting used to being alone, and I guess you were right, and I'm a bastard like the other guys. You just can't be wrong. Let's face it, you were never wrong. I'm like Superman, I never really ever gave a damn, and you believed in me. turn the light on to find that I've gone. But don't blame me when you're feeling let down. And I don't mean to go bust your bubble, but that's the trouble with true songs